Strong.
So hello everyone, it's Cleo's here. Are you ready to get started? Let's get started. So hello everyone. Our lesson today is the Battle of Jericho. And it comes from Joshua chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. So I'm going to send you over to Miss Latoya for our memory verse and prayer. And I'll see you right back here in just a minute.
Welcome back. It's time for our memory verse. This week, super excited, we're again in the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 2. Our vocab word is valor. That means having courage or being brave. So here's our verse. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand. Its king and the mighty men of valor." That's the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 2. Join me next week for another verse and a word. Bye-bye. You know what we have to do? We have to pray before we start our lesson. So, you got it. Bow your heads, close your eyes. Dear Lord, thank you for another Sunday to hear your word. Thank you for another year, 2021. Thank you for our children for joining in to hear the word. I pray that they share one thing they learned today with someone. Thank you for your continued blessings, your continued healings. Amen. Back to Miss Cleo for our lesson for this week.
So welcome back everyone. As I said, our lesson this week is the Battle of Jericho in Joshua's chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. Now last week we were talking about Rahab and the spies. Can anybody remember how many spies was it that went to visit Rahab? 2. Now, did Rahab believe in God? No, she didn't. But she said something to the spies that made us realize that she acknowledged God. Does anybody remember what she said? She said, "I know that your God is the God of the heavens." She said that we have seen and heard what your God did for your people, talking to the 2 spies, when you brought them out of Egypt. So she may not have been a believer at first, but she was a believer now. She did something for the 2 spies. What did she do? She hid them. Where did she hide them at? On her roof. On her roof under the flak. She asked something of the 2 spies. What did she ask them? She asked them if they would save her and her family when they came back to take over the city of Jericho, because she knew that God was going to give it to them. And did the 2 spies agree to it? They did. They told her to put a red cord in the window, and when they come back, make sure her entire family is in that house, and her family will be saved. So this week we're going to read about the Battle of Jericho. Now, one important thing is, this is the first battle that Joshua is now going into. Because remember, Joshua is the new leader now. So this is the first battle they're going into, and they have to trust and depend on God. And that's a lesson for us too. Trust and depend on God. So I'm going to be reading it out. The Bible Made Easy for Kids by Dave Strahler. And the two spies returned safely and told Joshua how scared the people of Jericho were. Early the next morning, Joshua and the Israelites went to camp near the Jordan River. Then Joshua said to the people, "When you see the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant, you are to follow it, but don't get too close to it." The Ark of the Covenant. Now this was a really beautiful box, and it had two angels on it. When God had told the children of Israel that he wanted to dwell among them, he wanted to live with them, and the children of Israel built this tent of meetings, the tabernacle, was a giant tent. There was a room where this box was to sit, and it was called the place Holy of Holies, and that's where God's presence was. So in this box was also the two stones that Moses received, which was called the Ten Commandments. And you remember the Ten Commandments was, there will be no other gods, but only me, God himself. That there will be no idols. Anything that you put above God, that's considered an idol. Also, don't use God's name, misplace it, don't use it in vain. Keep God's day holy for him. Honor your parents. Do not kill. Be faithful in marriage. Do not steal. Do not lie. And do not want what other people have. Those were the 10 commandments that Moses received from God when he went up on the mountain. So this was also included in the Ark of the Covenant. Also in the Ark of the Covenant was a jar that had manna in it, and that was the bread from heaven. When God fed the children of Israel when they were in the desert, that was a reminder for them to know what God had did. So that was in a jar, and it was also in the Ark of the Covenant. And the third thing in the Ark of the Covenant was Aaron's rod. Remember, Aaron was Moses' brother, and he had this staff, this wooden stick. Well, what God did was he made this dead stick come alive, and on this stick produced an almond, a small almond. And that was to show that the tribe that Aaron and Moses was from were the Levites. And they were the tribe that was supposed to take care of the tabernacle, the big tent of meetings when they get to go into worship. Only that tribe was to take care of the work that was needed to be done inside the tent of meetings. So those three things were in the Ark of the Covenant. Aaron's rod, the jar with the manna in it, and also the 10 Commandments. So they are bringing this along with them as they go conquer the city. The word consecrate means a willingness that you and I decide that in our heart, in our mind, in our soul, and in our body, that we're going to dedicate it to the Lord, to God. So that's what consecrate means. So the people consecrated themselves and started packing up. The next day, when the priests who were carrying an ark reached the Jordan River and their feet touched the water, the river stopped flowing. God made the water pile up in a heap further up the river at a town called Adam. Now, where else did we see God do a supernatural thing like this? The Red Sea. God did the Red Sea. So now the priests are ahead of the people, and they have stepped in the Jordan River. God has made it to where the water has backed up as in a heap and a pile. And now everyone is going across on dry land as they did in the Red Sea. They're crossing the Jordan River on dry land. While the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant stood in the middle of the Jordan, the people crossed over on dry ground. When the whole nation of Israel had crossed over, the Lord told Joshua to choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Each man was to carry a big stone from the middle of the river and put it in a pile where they camped. The stone would be a monument to remind the Israelites of how the Lord dried up the Jordan River. So now, from the 12 tribes, one person from each tribe is to take a stone and put it in this structure and make it a monument. And it's a reminder of what God has just did for them crossing the Jordan River. Then the priest carrying the ark joined everyone on the other side, and the river started flowing again as it had done before. Now, the children of Israel have just crossed the Jordan River, and they are now coming over to fight their enemies, which God told them to do. This is going to be a fight that's not like a normal fight. It's going to take faith. It's going to take courage. It's going to take patience. And it's going to take obedience to win this fight. All of that. Now, this is the first city that God is giving to the children of Israel. The first one. He's going to give them others, but this is the first one, Jericho, that they're going to take over in this promised land. And let's see how God does it. Having crossed the Jordan River, the Israelites were now in the promised land. But this was not a time for God's people to sit back and take it easy. The heathen nation living in this land weren't just going to hand over their city and farms and leave peacefully. The word heathen. Heathen is just a term for people that at that time, and even today, don't acknowledge God as being God. So that's why they're called heathens. And also these people were bad people. They had gods that they had made with their own hands that they were worshiping. And God is saying, they're not acknowledging me. It's because I'm the real God. And so he called them heathen people. God would certainly help his people to drive them out, but the Israelites needed to do their part. The first city God wanted the Israelites to conquer was the city of Jericho, the city where Rahab had hidden the two spies. Jericho had a huge, thick wall going all the way around it, and how would the Israelites ever get inside? They had God on their side, and if they obeyed him, he would certainly help them. The Lord told Joshua, "You and all your men are to march around the city once a day for 6 days. Then 7 priests with their trumpets are to walk in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, and then the priests must give one long blast on their trumpets, and all the people must shout as loudly as they can. When they do, the walls will crumble, and your men can charge straight into the city." So God has come up with this battle plan. And God said, march around the city one time for 6 days. The priests will be in front of you with their trumpets. The people weren't to say anything. Now this must look really silly, because believe me, there were probably the men of Jericho up on top of the walls looking down on them, saying, "What are these people doing? They must be afraid to fight." But look, God said, day 1, march around the city walls. 1 time, go back home. Day 2, march around the city walls. one time, go back home. When you get to day 7, march around the walls 7 times. And when the priests blow the trumpet, everybody shout as loud as you can. And that's what they did. So let's see. On the first day, the priests walked around the city of Jericho, blowing their trumpet, and the Ark of the Covenant carried by the priests behind them. Joshua had told the people to stay quiet, to not to even say a word. The priests walked around the city once a day for 6 days, as the Lord had told them to do. On the 7th day, when the sun rose, they walked around the city, not just once, but 7 times. The 7th time around, Joshua said to the people, "Get ready to shout, for the Lord has given you this city. Only Rahab and her family will be kept safe because she hid our spies. You must destroy everything in the city and not take a thing for yourselves. Anything that is made of silver, gold, bronze, or iron belongs to the Lord and must be put with the other treasures." Then the priests blew their trumpets long and hard, and all the people shouted as loud as they could, and the huge city walls crumbled. All the fighting men charged into the city and destroyed everything in it. The only part of the wall that didn't collapse was the part where Rahab lived. The 2 spies went up to Rahab's house to rescue her and her family because of the promise they made to keep her safe. And Rahab lived with the people of Israel from that day on. Wow. So they didn't have to take out a sword. They didn't use a shield. They didn't use a spear. All they did was walk around the wall for 7 days. And the 7th day they walked around 7 times. The priests blew the trumpet and they shouted, and the walls came crumbling down, and they took over the city. God is so amazing. All we had to do was just believe in Him and trust Him. If God is for us, who could be against us? So that's our story. I hope you liked it. See you again next week.
Be strong.